So hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Business at its Best seminar on becoming a better manager through social emotional intelligence, presented by Dana Cosby. And I actually like the other title better, How to Manage Like the Wizard of Oz. I think that's pretty cool, pretty fun. I'm Dawn Johnson. I'm the Vice President of Chamber Partnership Services here, and very excited to have this seminar going on today. We do have a few housekeeping rules that I'd like to tell you about. In today's session, we will be recording it, so please keep your mics on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have questions, those can be submitted via the chat window. You can see an example of that Aaron just submitted. And we will have a Q&A portion at the conclusion of the presentation where we will read your submission for our presenters to answer. So please, if you have questions, write them down as we go. And before we get started, we'd like to give you a little clip from our sponsor, Graves Gilbert Clinic. And they, again, are our title sponsor for Business at its Best. Aaron?
At Graves Gilbert Clinic, their top priority is the health and safety of their patients, employees, and visitors. And because of that, Graves Gilbert Clinic is now offering telehealth visits, which allows patients and physicians to use an app to communicate via video chat. Any patient who would like to schedule a telehealth appointment is encouraged to call their Graves Gilbert Clinic physician's office directly, or call the Graves Gilbert Clinic telehealth hotline at 270-746-5790.
Awesome, thank you. And again, the title sponsor being Graves Gilbert Clinic, we appreciate all our sponsors and the support so we can be able to do this great programming like we have. So with that, I am going to introduce our speaker, Dr. Dana Cosby. Dr. Cosby is the MBA Director for Western Kentucky University. In addition to her PhD, Dr. Cosby holds the designations of SHRM, SHRM, SCP, SPHR, Senior Professional in Human Resource designations through the National Society for Human Resource Management. GPHR, Global Professional in Human Resources, and CCP, Certified Compensation Professional designation earned through the National World at Work organization. Dana is a member of the International Society for Human Resource Management and World at Work. She is a member of the local Southern Kentucky Society for Human Resource Management chapter, where she is a member of the board of directors. She also is a graduate of Leadership Bowling Green and has served on a number of nonprofit boards, including the United Way of South Central Kentucky, Barren River Child Advocacy Center, the International Center, the Warren County Bowling Green International Festival, and Plum Tree Montessori School. Dana, we really appreciate you being here today, and I am going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I'm glad to be with you in this virtual seminar to talk about a topic that I hope you will find interesting. Maybe if I can get my... Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So what we're going to talk about today is a pretty timely subject. As you know, we have been in this crazy kind of situation with COVID, with employees here, there, and everywhere. And we have really kind of had to pivot and think about different strategies and techniques to use to become the best managers that we can be during this time of incredible change. And so what we're going to talk about today is something called social emotional intelligence. Okay. And I wanted to really get this started by talking about kind of the elephant in the room, which is this thing about remote working. Because I would say that almost every manager has been impacted in some way by the remote working environment or the kind of the deployed resources of employees. And so there has been a lot of good that has come out of this adaptation to virtual. We're finding that remote work has been much more powerful and much more productive than I think most thought it would be. And we have created sort of this new world for employees, which of course creates this new world for managers. And as we're thinking about the pluses of remote working, as well as the challenges, we know that even though we're working in a remote situation, we still have some of the issues that we're going to talk about today with regard to emotional intelligence that surface rather quickly. And so I wanted to preface this discussion by saying, hey, remote work is probably here to stay in some form. And as such, we really need to think about how social and emotional intelligence can help us to really help our employees thrive in that sort of situation. So as we consider thinking about the new normal, connection is going to be one of the biggest keys. Employees, to be engaged in organizations, we know really have to have a connection to the people there, a connection to a place, connection to a routine, and most importantly, a connection to purpose. And so today we're going to talk about how, as a manager or a team leader of people, that you can actually improve and strengthen connections by thinking about social and emotional intelligence. So I'm going to do this quiz to begin. All right. So if you will, in the chat box, I would like for you to answer this question. What drives a team's ability to perform exceptionally across many different tasks or activities? What drives a team's ability to perform exceptionally across many different tasks or activities? Don, we really need some like trivia music, something, I don't know. Is it individual intelligence, group cohesion, taking turns when speaking, group motivation, or social sensitivity? Ooh, nice, good answers. Let's see here. Getting a lot of B's here. D. Oh, B's and D's. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, let's take a look at this, because it's very, very interesting to think about what it is that really drives performance in work groups, in teams. Okay. Look, it wasn't B at all. Can you believe that? There is a whole body of research. Now, all these things are important, obviously. But there's a whole body of research out there that talks about those teams that are really able to perform exceptionally across different scenarios, different tasks. They tend to have these items as predictors. When the groups are together and they're conducting work, they take turns in speaking, and they also have a great deal of social sensitivity. And so this kind of tells us that one of the really important things that we need to think about in terms of managing our people and managing our teams is sort of how to cultivate the kind of culture and how to get our employees to develop this in tuneness with each other so that they will have that collective team intelligence to get things done. Okay. Now, the art of leadership and the science of management. So, when we're talking about becoming a better manager, there are some things that we need to get out of the way. And that is, of course, that good management is not about whether things go right or wrong. Sometimes things are going to go wrong. That's just the nature of business and organizations. Being a successful manager is about how you can work with your team and help your team find successful approaches to solving the problems as they come up. And so social and emotional intelligence can help you do just that. It can help you improve your management skills, and it can also help you improve your leadership skills. which is a little bit different. So what is this thing? Let's talk about emotional intelligence first. Social emotional intelligence is kind of a combination of two areas that have been in the management world for a number of years. It started with Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, way back in 1995. He introduced this concept that in order to be effective in the management world, that it's important to have this emotional intelligence. You also will see this as EQ, or the emotional quotient, kind of like the IQ, except it's about the E, emotional. So anyway, what is emotional intelligence and what's all the buzz? Well, it is the capacity to be aware of, control, and be able to express your own emotions and be able to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. And you do this by not only being aware of your emotions, but also being able to understand and sometimes predict the emotions that will be coming with or from coworkers and people around you. Now, this emotional intelligence concept really took off. Goleman wrote this book in 1995. And even all these years later, we have learned that it's very important. In fact, it was the most desirable workplace trait for 2020, as we're having, lots of other elements in the workplace, like managing across generations, etc., all coming together. Understanding emotional intelligence is key to making the interpersonal relationships work. This morning, I actually did a Google search to see how many hits I would get on emotional intelligence. And as of this morning, I got 52,700,000 Google hits for this topic and for this concept. And you can see that it's made headlines in a number of different fields. It is part of this overall movement of creating a culture, creating the environment for employees to thrive. Let me give you a little bit of information about the statistic, okay? So the emotional intelligence statistic, when we're looking at emotional quotient, or the EQ of people, we find that 90% of the top performers have a high EQ score. So they're very much in tune with understanding their feelings, being able to manage their feelings, and also deal with other folks. So you also can find that success in your job is going to be comprised by about 58% of job performance. So your EQ will result in about 58% of your job performance and your success in it. It's also been shown in the literature that people with high EQ make $29,000 a year more than their lower EQ counterparts. So it is something that increases productivity, job performance, and then also can have good financial consequences for individuals that work hard on this area. Now, the good thing about emotional intelligence is this is a skill that can continue to evolve and develop. You can work on strategies, you can develop new skills in this area for improvement. So it's not like so many of the kind of personality dimension sorts of things that you get. This is an acquired skill that you can have. The other part of what we're going to talk about today is social intelligence. And Goleman also wrote a book on social intelligence to sort of introduce that into the management literature. And what social intelligence is about is sort of the relationship or relationships that you have with other people. From a lay person standpoint, social intelligence is often synonymous with things such as tact, street smarts, or good people skills. When we're talking about things like soft skills that we're looking for in employees, we're generally talking about social intelligence. Now, why it is important to couple emotional intelligence and social intelligence together now is to really get the robust combination of a work environment, a way to manage employees that has a strong foundation of emotional intelligence while learning to adapt and adjust to the social factors. So what I'm going to talk about now is a model of social emotional intelligence that's actually out of the Ross School of Business in Michigan. Two scholars there, Alexander and Sanchez, have written papers around this idea that when we are looking at skill development for managers, we need to be thinking about external things and internal things and understand that there are some very concrete things that we can do to improve on them. Now, I want to do a temperature check right now with chat. And so tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very little and 10 being quite a bit, what would you say your knowledge is right now of emotional intelligence? Okay. Wonderful. Hey, Monica. Okay, so now that being said, it looks like we have mostly folks that know about emotional intelligence. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how saturated do you feel your organization or your team is in terms of understanding emotional intelligence? Hey, Emily. Okay. All right. So it looks like this group has a pretty good understanding of emotional intelligence, but sometimes that doesn't happen organically throughout organizations. So it sounds like that understanding some strategies to help it pervade the organization would be very helpful. Okay. So with this model, we're going to first talk about internally focused emotional intelligence skills. And this is sort of person focused in your ability to understand your emotions and regulate your responses. And we're going to talk about 2 dimensions of this. We're going to talk about self-awareness, which is that understanding piece. And then we're also going to talk about self-management, which is how you regulate your responses. Now, the social intelligence portion of this is about the relationship piece. And this is going to be the external piece we will talk about. And this will be your ability to notice and understand experiences of others in order to improve relationships. And we will talk about 2 elements, including social awareness, or your ability to accurately read the dynamic reactions of individuals and groups, and also social competence. And this is your ability to bring out the best in others and in the relationship. Okay, so let's take a look first at the internally focused emotional intelligence skills. So when you think about how you are going to get to the point where you can be able to understand or predict the emotions of others, or to read the emotions of others, it's super important to have self-awareness. And so there are lots of different tips and ideas that are out there on how you can do that. But some of the most prevalent are sort of around the idea of keeping track of your feelings. Understand, the different ways that folks can push your buttons, for example, or, what are some triggers that you have, and be able to understand those emotional triggers. All of this sort of understanding and self-reflection has also led into another area of management study, and that is the whole idea of mindfulness. And with mindfulness, this relates to emotional intelligence in that you're stopping to understand and be aware of your emotions. And so you will develop skills when you practice mindfulness of being present in the moment, of understanding signals and sensations in new ways. Now, from your perspective, especially some of you who do have experience with emotional intelligence, what are some other strategies or things that you might think of that might be helpful in this regard? You can put it on the chat. What are some ways or strategies that you have used as part of your understanding of emotional intelligence to create this awareness? Okay, so some of the ideas that we've gotten, Ron says better listening. Absolutely. You will see throughout social and emotional intelligence sorts of strategies. Listening is a very important key. Self-care, understanding, to step back and take time to keep your emotions from getting unchecked, eating healthy, exercise, all of those things, all are part and parcel of this self-awareness component. Allowing yourself to feel different emotions, excellent. Setting boundaries, setting healthy boundaries, yes. Great responses. Okay, let's move on to the self-management piece. If you are tuned out of your own emotions, you will be poor at reading them in other people. And this is why the self-awareness is so important. This is why Monica's last point of letting yourself feel emotions, why that is so important. If you are always blocking or hiding or ignoring emotions, then that will lessen your ability to really understand others. So let's go on to the second component, the second part of the internal emotional intelligence skills, and that is self-management. We all know people who are brilliant, but perhaps have not been very successful in their professional life. And sometimes that boils down to emotional intelligence, and in particular, it falls into the category of the self-management or regulation part of that, because sometimes people, although they have high IQs, they don't have high EQs, and they're not able to regulate things, and they have inappropriate outbursts, or are unable to build the healthy kinds of relationships that you have to be able to build in order to be successful in an organization. So as you think about the self-management piece, this is to say that you understand yourself, you understand what triggers your emotions, you practice being present in the moment. In terms of self-management, you have to think about, okay, when I'm triggered, when something makes me angry, when something makes me sad, when something is upsetting, how do you regulate your responses appropriately so that it is not damaging to relationships in the workplace? Because you do not want to damage relationships because that impedes your ability to work together for the successful outcome that you want to. So one strategy that you can use is to make sure that you differentiate between responding and reacting, and make sure that you understand in emotionally charged situations that you are able to respond appropriately and not just simply react impulsively. And so to do this, when you know yourself and you know what these things are that might trigger you, and if you are able to anticipate when this may happen, you can plan ahead for an appropriate response. There are tips and techniques that you can use, breathing, making sure that you have mental imagery. There's a whole lot of different strategies that you can use to kind of prepare yourself for what might be an emotional event for you. And here's another thing. Remember that in this whole world of emotional intelligence, one of the ways that you know you are achieving healthy emotional intelligence is to be responsible for your own actions. A lot of times when people are working on emotional intelligence skills, they get to a point, but they tend to project and blame some negative thing on another person or a situation or something. One of the hallmarks of good emotional intelligence is being responsible for your own actions. Now, we're going to go to the second part of the model. I can't get this off. I do not know why. The second part of the model, which is the externally focused social intelligence skills. And so again, this is about your ability to notice and really understand the experiences of others in order to improve relationships. And so we're going to look first at social awareness. And as managers that are busy, and I am certain all of you all are very busy, you have to make social awareness a priority. And so you do this by being present in the situation, paying attention to what's going on. Even in our virtual world of meetings and things, being able to sort of check out what's going on with the folks in virtual land or in the meeting room. Pay attention to conflicts that may be underlying or brewing, because we'll talk about those in just a second. These are all things that you need to be aware of. Pay attention to them so that you can connect with the people on a human level to resolve conflict or to really build relationships. The second thing with social intelligence is to respect cultural differences. And this is something that we're learning all the time, new information about. This impacts the whole communication cycle in terms of nonverbals, in terms of understanding different words, translations, and just understanding lots about other people in this very diverse world that we live in. And so respecting cultural differences is definitely an important part of social awareness. Another part is to, as Ron pointed out, listen better. And when you listen, there's a term, listen with empathy. What that means is think about the other person, put yourself in their shoes and think about how they are feeling, what their experience is in the situation that you may be involved with them in bridging or building a relationship. And so you want to listen to them with empathy and be very present. Whenever we're doing listening skills as managers, the most important thing to remember is if you want to be a good listener, look like a good listener, make good eye contact, have open body language, and don't check out. I'm a mother, so I can promise you that I can check out. My children will start talking and I can be listening, but I can be far, far away. Occasionally I'll stop back in and go, oh, I see. But that is a very bad practice to have because we really need to be engaged and present and involved. The other piece with social awareness is to resolve conflict. And especially in the virtual world, it's a little bit more difficult to pick up cues sometimes. And because it is difficult to pick up some of the cues that you would normally pick up in meetings, you may have conflict just right under the surface getting ready to bubble up. And so it's really important as a manager to pay attention to what's going on with your teams and to resolve that conflict as you see it arising. And you know, don't delay dealing with the conflict, because in today's fast-moving world, delayed conflict is much worse conflict when it erupts. So, thinking about this, tell me a little bit in chat about these items, these externally focused social intelligence skills in the social awareness arena. Which do you think is the hardest for your team? Which of these things is the hardest for your team? Listening with empathy. Interesting. I hear you, Dustin. That is a hard part. Okay. All right. So it sounds like listening with empathy and sort of developing that presence and understanding of the other person is something that is a struggle. And so we will talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Let's very quickly move on to the second element of social intelligence, which is social competence. Okay. And so, Dustin, this is a part that might be something really interesting to you as a new manager. So with social awareness, we talked about those kinds of things, you know, developing the empathetic listening, focusing on understanding cultural differences and those sorts of things. Now, the social competence piece of this is really the piece where you do bring out the best in others and the relationship. And it is where you are positioning yourself in terms of your social intelligence skills to make the best of what you can do in connecting them and building those relationships. And so to develop social competence, the one thing that you need to consider is how approachable are you? You know, as a manager, you want to make sure that you are very approachable and that people, you know, they're not afraid to come to you, and that they feel like that they can come to you and talk with you and relate to you. And let me say that one of the best things that you can do to be approachable is, wait for it, smile. If you will smile, this many times will break down barriers and will let people know that you are approachable. So that's one way that managers can easily create sort of this approachable persona is through smiling. Another thing that's kind of a really important part of social competence, but it's a little bit difficult. It's one of the things that you have to master, and that is to make sure to be authentic. One of the highest order things in social intelligence is not creating this facade of your social intelligence, but it's actually being authentic in what you say and what you do and earning respect. The second part of social competence that's super important has to do with the relationships that you build with your teammates or the people that you manage. And as you do this, and as you develop social intelligence around your team, the first thing you have to do is you have to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the team members. And it's important to know that you will probably have first impressions that may be radically different than what the team members' actual strengths and weaknesses maybe are. And so in today's war for talent, your employees are valuable. They are precious resources. And so as a manager, you need to be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses and then try to help them and direct them in ways where they can be successful. And you need to try to help them shore up some of the areas where they need some improvement. But when you do this, as a socially intelligent manager, we like to see folks coach for value. And what this means is you have to provide feedback. And with the generations that are coming up into the workplace, it's super important that you give timely, relevant, accurate feedback. And when you do this in a socially intelligent way, you're going to want to make sure that your coaching or your reprimand or your discipline or whatever it is that you're doing is surrounded or undergirded, maybe is a better word, with the notion that employee is valuable and that you are doing this coaching to improve them because they're valuable and you want them to improve. And so coaching for value is a super important management skill to develop. So finally, this is kind of a recap of how you can improve social and emotional intelligence in your team. The whole thing needs to be undergirded by emotional intelligence. Understanding emotions, understanding yourself, understanding how to manage yourself, being able to predict things or social things in the workplace. To build your healthy environment for your team in your workplace, you must have a trusting environment. So building trust is completely required to have a good, healthy team, workplace, work group, etc. They have to trust you, and you have to trust them. The second component is continuous learning, particularly in the area of emotional intelligence. Have your team members, your coworkers, your employees know that continuous learning about things in the emotional intelligence area is really important. As a manager, as a supervisor, you can have someday lunch and learns with a topic on something related to healthy social emotional intelligence. And then third, healthy team norms. As a leader, you are really reinforcing what people in your workplace believe to be the thing that they can do or should not do. And so make sure that you promote the kinds of team norms that will allow the people to have that authentic communication, to understand that it's important to be present, it's important to stop and listen. And then finally, make sure that you have a real connection personally as the manager with the whole notion of understanding how to monitor your employees in the group setting, one-on-one. Think about how you can pick up on things that will help you interact with them and build relationships that will be healthy and prosperous and bring good things to you and your organization. Okay? And so with that, I am going to stop this part of the presentation and see if we have any questions or thoughts or tips or techniques.
Nobody?
Somebody does. Somebody. I wish they could talk. I don't like the chat. I like.
If somebody wants to open their mic up and ask a question, you feel more comfortable doing that, feel free to do so. I'm more about that too, Dana.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Turn on your mics.
There was a slide that you had, and I can't remember exactly what it was about, but it was a gig.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Okay. So way back when, in the days of pre-COVID, there were lots of trends reported that talked about how, you know, as we leaned into digital, we were going to have the gig economy. Okay. And so the gig economy, this predates COVID. The projections were that we were going to move into the gig economy. So instead of, you know, traditional employee arrangements and things, we were going to have a lot more freelancers, gig workers, et cetera, and remote working was going to become, you know, a prevalent part of our employment landscape. And so with that, you know, people were predicting how that was going to work and what was going to happen and how the employees were going to stay connected and how companies were going to continue to have that culture that companies need to have an identity. And so then, of course, when COVID happened, bam, we suddenly became, you know, kind of in that space, even though we weren't moving to gigs as much as just remote working. So that's going to be an important strategy that companies that are going to have remote working arrangements are going to have to carefully consider in terms of, you know, what do they need to do to keep their employees productive and happy while also maintaining some sort of organizational identity and organizational culture. It's going to be really important.
Yeah. Huh, thank you. Anybody else?
I have a question. If you have a team that part of your team is pretty easily to trust people, you know, trust comes easy to them, but then the other part of your team kind of feels like people have to earn your trust. How do you coach people through that to where everybody is on the same page with trust?
So in terms of trust, you know, there are lots of different dynamics that could be driving that. For example, managing across generations, you know, there are, you know, different generations have different views of work ethic and you know, how long it takes to pay your dues and those kinds of things. So that is one, you know, that is kind of one issue that you can sort of peel back and talk through. Again, teaching, if it's a generational thing, you can have some frank and honest conversations around, you know, this is why this particular generation feels this way. These are their cultural signposts that sort of drove them to sort of shape and form these beliefs. Another thing that happens a lot in teams where it can be masked as a trust issue, but sometimes it is a communication style sort of situation where you have people with different needs for information or data. And so sometimes they are slow to trust based on non-data information. So really, I would think it would depend on the assessment of your team, you know, your people that feel differently, you know, what is driving that, and then sort of work them through those issues, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else?
All right. Anyone else? Is this Emily Clark of, where did she go? I think she left. Why does I click on her? Okay.
I don't know if you saw the comment, Dana, about from Chloe. I really appreciate the separation between social and emotional, because I've seen people with high social but very low emotional, yet they think they're all set on the EQ train. I like that.
I love that. I love that comment, Chloe. And that's, and that's an important part of understanding social and emotional intelligence, because you can have some people that, they're very in control of their own emotions, but they have completely no idea about the context that they're operating in terms of social awareness and what they need to be doing there. So I think that it is something that needs to be very blended. So Emily Clark, do they not have cameras in Auburn, or are you just turning your camera off just so I can't see your smiling face? This is my former student extraordinaire, Emily Clark. Now she won't turn on the camera. Oh, there. Oh, okay. Okay, wonderful. So, okay, can you speak to the value of behavioral styles when developing employees as a manager? Yes. So one of the things that you need, that is very helpful to do when you are perhaps succession planning or developing someone to be a manager, they need to have an assessment of sort of their natural tendencies, their natural styles. And one of the assessments that I really, really like is the DISC assessment, which is the DISC communication assessment. And it helps people understand the way that they operate in terms of, are they very driven? Are they more of a follower? Are they very talkative? Are they more, data oriented? It has all sorts of different behavioral styles. The important issue with any sort of assessment like that is that these behavioral styles provided as a baseline can give you coachable information to help you improve the management development process. But most of, if not all of these different assessments or behavioral styles that people will take they're not end all be alls for a manager. So there's not a perfect cookie cutter behavioral style that is going to be successful in every organization. It will depend on the organizational culture and on how the person understands themselves and how they are able to accommodate what is needed in a particular leadership situation or management situation. Does that help, or do you want more or different?
He said thumbs up.
Thumbs up, okay. All right. A book I would highly recommend is The E-Myth Revisited, when understanding more about who should be managers. Excellent. I have not read that book, Jeannie. That sounds like a good.
It is a good book.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, we got one more.
Okay. Can you talk about the importance of candor in providing feedback that protects the relationship? Yes. So there is a way to provide feedback that is honest and authentic, but doesn't damage. You don't want the person to feel like the behavior or the thing that you are trying to improve is part of them. You want to be able to separate the incident, the behavior, the whatever it is you're providing feedback on, away from the person. Okay, so it is the action that is problematic, or it is the developmental need that needs to be improved. A lot of times, without really thinking about protecting the relationship, people will be perhaps, overly blunt, or, I'm not going to candy coat this. I'm just going to get down to brass tacks. Here it is. And what happens is that sort of feedback oftentimes erodes the chance that you have to develop that employee up. Yes. So does that help, Rob Wilson? Absolutely, Chloe. Speaking to authenticity, it really needs to come from a place of care and utility instead of judgment. Yes, you said that. I think you said that much better than I did. Yeah.
These are all great questions and comments. Anybody else? We still have a couple minutes if you need.
Thank you, Rob.
All right.
All right.
Well, with that, Dana, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time, and this was a really interesting session. I think hopefully everybody got a little bit more educated on emotional and social intelligence. And of course, they can always contact you later if they need to have any other questions or want more information, right?
Absolutely. And I'll make a thankless plug for the WKU MBA program. One of the things that we are really about is helping our students develop the soft skills and this social competency or social intelligence competence that is so interesting. So,
awesome.
Anyway, feel free to call me. I'll help you out any way that I can.
Okay, awesome. And with that, Erin, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Esser. She's our Director of Programs and Events, and she's going to go over some upcoming events for our Chamber partners.
Thanks, Dawn. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Dawn. And thanks, Dana. I knew that was going to be really, really helpful, but I also found it very, very fascinating. There's a lot of layers to it. And there was a lot of components that you mentioned about coachable attributes and, the generation factor. So I found it very, very fascinating. So thank you so much for taking the time to put all of that together. We really greatly appreciate it. But I'm Lauren Esser. I'm the Director of Programs and Events here at the Bowling Green Chamber. And I apologize for the way my office looks in the background, but that's because we're 2 days away from our 86th annual celebration. That's this Thursday. It's going to take place at the Sloan Convention Center. So for those of you all who haven't gotten your tickets yet, you still have time. We will be selling tickets up until Thursday. And for those of you that will be there in person or virtual, we are so excited to see you guys. It's been a year since we've really had an in-person kind of signature chamber event. So we are so, so excited. And we look forward to seeing you all there. And if anybody has any questions or wants more information, you can reach out to the chamber or contact me directly. So I hope everyone has a great day. Dawn, did you have anything you wanted to add before we close? She's on mute, but I can read Dawn's lips. So I'm pretty sure she said, nope, I think that's all good.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again, Dana. Good to see you. And thank you again to everyone that joined us. Have a great Tuesday, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye,
Dana.
everybody.